Today, we become legends.
Hey there, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future content. Today we're going to cover the top 15 late game gods in Smite. These are gods that generally perform pretty badly early on and need a lot of levels and gold to become relevant. But boy, when they do get that golden XP, they can be some of the scariest gods to face in the game. As with my early game gods video, there will be 3 from each class to make up the total 15, just to make sure there's something for everyone rather than the list just being 15 hunters and assassins, which it definitely could be. Also, I have some exciting news to the Nay Nation. I've partnered with Hi-Rez and a company called Nexus to open my own storefront for gems, where a percentage of the earnings goes to me on everything. It's basically like a creator link. So if you want to support the channel but still get something worth your while like Smite gems or even games, this is by far the best way to do it. You get gems at no extra cost and it helps me create bigger, better Smite content in the future. So I hope you all check it out at nexus.gg/intersect. That's nexus.gg/intersect with a 3, just like on my channel. Enjoy the video. So kicking off the list at the bottom spot we have Amaterasu. Now there's going to be some people baby raging at me for not putting her higher, and also some people baby raging at me for even putting her on the list in general. Ama definitely performs at her best in full late game teamfights where she can utilize her auras and AoE stun to best effect. However, the only reason she opens the list rather than being higher is simply that Ama generally has decent early game now. She can compete with wave clear and poke for the most part and can even box when built right, which makes me feel weird putting her any higher than 15. She's one of only a few reverse bell power curve gods. She's strong early, falls off mid, then comes back swinging late game. Dragging his way into the number 14 spot we have Fafnir. This is a similar case to Ama in that Fafnir's late game is insane, but he can also compete in the early to mid game too. However, his late game is literally the best of any Guardian, period, which is why I think he still deserves a spot on this list. That AoE Coerce is something no other god can even compare to for late game sieges or Fire Giant. Another warrior is taking the number 13 spot. Yeah, for those that saw my previous video, I don't make special treatments for the gods within the classes themselves, even if they're my favourite class. Warriors in general are more early game than most, and so you'll find them quite low down on this one. The second warrior for this list is Nike though, who thrives generally off of being late game due to her passive benefits for the whole team. She also just does well in team fights, being extremely hard to kill due to her giant shield. However, Nike isn't exactly a shiny example when you think of late game, so she still does reside a bit lower on the list. He's beatled all the competition so far to claim the number 12 spot. That's right, it's Khepri. Of course, Khepri performs great late game with a res that is unlike anything else and can revive one of the hard carries we have further up the list and still win the fight. However, Khepri also has mad early game, with his 2 being one of the best Guardian wave clear tools there is, and solid early CC, so he's knocked down a few places by that since he's not truly only late game. And our final warrior just didn't quite have the conviction or warrior's will to cavalry charge into the top 10, so at number 11 is where Guan Yu will sit. Definitely a late game god with strong healing, CC and damage for teamfights. However, similar to Khepri, he also has a solid laning phase in early game and can even be jungled, in which case he's obviously more aggressive and early game focused than normal. So in general, I think this is a pretty good spot for Guan. Rolling into the top 10 of the list though, we have our final guardian, Geb. He is here for very similar reasons to Khepri. He can save carries late game, he has great CC and initiation, one of the best if not the best guardian in the late game. Probably a close one with Fafnir for that one though. AoE Coerce is pretty hard to beat. However, Geb also has less early and mid game than the other 2 Guardians picked, and so I think Geb really embodies that late game playstyle much better, and so the final tank is out of the way at number 10. Our god for number 9 has been eaten by an unknown entrant, but lucky for us, we have Bakasura here who can fill in for him. Baka is an absolute monster when he gets items and levels online, no doubt. He can rip through teams like butter with his insane attack speed, true damage and cone attacks. The only reason Baka isn't higher is because generally mid-game is where he pops off. Get a lead by power farming early with Eat and G-Blade, then come out swinging with 3 items when everyone else has 2. Late game is generally where everyone is full build and it's much harder to get into the backline as Baka in a true late game scenario, hence why he's only number 9 for this specific list. Our next contestant is a bit late as he's had to travel through space and time itself just to show up today. Janus is an absolute late game machine, period. If you've never seen a genuinely good Janus play with portals in late game teamfights, it's absolutely disgusting behaviour. I personally would have put Janus higher, but I do take into account community perception a little for these placements, which took him down a bit. I feel like most people aren't aware of how just insane Janus is late game when you only use portal for mobility. However, Janus can also still make early rotations with his ultimate and portals, and from level 9 onwards has no problem with wave clear, so he's not useless early and mid, just stronger late for sure. There's a monster on the loose! Just kidding, it's Scylla who takes our number 7 spot. Now, it might seem weird to put Scylla barely halfway up a list of late game gods, but trust me, stick around and you'll see why there are 6 gods above her on this list. That, however, does not discount Scylla's monstrous late game presence. Her 1-2 combo often one-shots, especially with Poly. Her ultimate, of course, can reset on a kill to wipe whole teams. No one's laughing when facing down a Scylla with 6 items on level 20. Oh, and while we're on mages, I highly considered Freya for the list, but ultimately there wasn't enough space for 4 mages and she had to be cut. Definitely my number 16 place though, she just barely didn't make the list. And finally, only at the number 6 spot does our first hunter on the list actually appear, and that's Xbalanque. Now, of course, he's a hunter. That alone would qualify him for this list, to be honest, but there's a reason Xbal isn't 15 and he's 6. His late game presence is extremely strong, with autos that absolutely chunk and an ult that can blind an entire team on a siege or fire giant attempt to swing the fight in your favour. Like Scylla, the only reason Xbal is this low is because others are better, not him being bad. Sonic booming into the top 4, we have Mercury. You all know One Punch Man had to be here somewhere. We've all seen the Double J videos where he literally one-shot crits people. Not many gods can do that with a normal game setup. Because of his massive attack speed steroid, Mercury doesn't even need to build attack speed, and so he can pump all his items into power and crit and still have near capped attack speed while critting for 800 plus. Mercury is simply nuts late game, and even though his early to mid game is passable, the late game is where you're there for Mercury, and so he takes the top 5 spot for the list. Our final mage has been revealed at number 4, and that's Alquang. Of course, not really a mage, mostly a way to get 4 assassins onto one list, to be honest. Nah, but for real, Alquang has some of the most insane late game damage you're ever gonna see for a magical god. He can so easily delete people in team fights and even execute tanks if they're giving you trouble or just for a reset so you can re-engage from the skies. Alquang's early game is also hot fucking garbage, which elevated his list in the position by a couple of places. He's solely late game, whereas gods like Mercury actually have some semblance of an early game. Breaking into the top 3 late game gods of all time, we have Rama. Not only is Rama a hunter, he's one of the most late game hunters there is, and some of the most reliable damage output in the late game that you can find. Mages like Scylla and assassins like Mercury can sometimes have inconsistent damage since they're ability reliant or melee, whatever it is. Rama just holds left click and ults to secure the kill or buy time. Rama is again somewhat of an inverse bell curve in a way, since his astral arrows give him a fairly solid early game, but then he falls off hard mid and comes back out swinging in those late game team fights. However, our number 2 spot brings even more late game pain while having even less early game. That is of course Artemis. By far the strongest late game hunter with the best attack speed steroid in the game at 80%, along with amazing CC in Tusky and Trap. But of course Artemis pays for all this with her terrible early game. It's been made better over the years, don't get me wrong, but just because it used to be near unusable and it's now passable doesn't make it good. Artemis is definitely the strongest late game hunter, no doubt, but is she the strongest late game god as a whole? Well, no. My number 1 pick for this list is likely one all of you expected, and that's Kali. Honestly, there's no argument that needs to be made here. I think anyone who's played Smite for more than a few weeks will agree Kali is by a large margin the strongest late game god there is. Not only does she have insane damage through auto attack, she also has one of the best AA chains in existence for kin size, and so she gets tons of extra damage from those. And of course, whenever Kali kills an enemy, she full heals her entire health bar and can continue running at the next target until all 5 of the enemy team are dead. Oh, and did I mention she literally can't die for 4 seconds? Well, she can. And 4 seconds in Kali's world is 2 dead enemy backliners and a full HP restore. As I said, there's really no arguing against this one. You can debate the rest of the list to the ends of the earth, but unless a new god is added that surpasses her, I think Kali will remain the strongest late game pick of all time. And that's it for the list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Definitely leave a comment down below saying if you agree with any of the placements or disagreed. It'd be interesting to know the community perception of these lists. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.